Hello, folks. Today we are going to see about the first part of the Sherlock Holmes, A Study in Scarlet, Part 1. So, most of the story will be in the perspective point of Dr. Watson. And let's go into the story. Part 1, being a reprint from the remnants of John H. Watson, MD, late of the Army Medical Department. Chapter 1, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. In the year 1878, I took my degree of Doctor of Medicine of the University of London and proceeded to Netley to go through the course prescribed for surgeons in the army. Having completed my course prescribed for surgeon, and I duly attached to the 5th Northumberland Fusilier for assistant surgeon. The regiment was stationed in India at the time, and before I could join it, the Second Afghan War had broken out. On landing at Bombay, I learned that my corps had advanced through the passes and was already deep in the enemy's country. I followed, however, with many other officers who were in the same situation as myself, and succeeded in reaching Kandahar in safety, where I found my regiment and once ended upon my new duties. The campaign brought honorous promotion to many, but for me it had nothing but misfortune and disaster. I was removed from my brigade and attached to Brisk with whom I served at the fatal battle of Maiwand. There I was struck on the shoulder by a Jessile bullet, which shattered the bone and grazed the subclavian artery. I should have fallen into the hands of the murderous Ghazis, and had it not been for the devotion and courage shown by Murray, my orderly, who threw me across a pack horse and succeeded in bringing me safety to Britain line. Worn with pain and weak from prolonged hardships which I had undergone, I was removed with great train of wounded sufferers to be based hospital at Peshawar. Here I rallied and had already improved so far as to be able to walk about the wards, and even to bask a little upon the veranda. And when I was struck down by a energetic fever, that curse of Indian possessions. For months my life was despaired of, and when at last I came to myself and became convalescent, I was so weak and emaciated that a medical board determined that not a day should be lost in sending me back to England. I was dispatched accordingly in the troopship Orontes, and landed a month later on Portsmouth jetty, with my health irrelevantly ruined, but with permission from parental government to spend the next 9 months in attempting to improve it. I had neither kin or kin in England, was therefore as free as air, and as free as an income of 11 shillings and 6 pennies a day will permit it to a man to be. Under such circumstances, I naturally gravitated to London, that great cesspool into which all the lodgers and idlers of the empire are irresistibly drained. There I stayed for some time at a private hotel in the Strand, leading a comfortableness, meaningless existence, and spending such money as I had, considerably more freely than I ought. So alarming did the state of my finance become, then I soon realized that I must either leave the metropolis and rusticate somewhere in the country, or that I must make complete alteration in my lifestyle. Choosing the latter alternative, I began by making up my mind to leave the hotel and take up my quarters in some less penetrous and less expensive domicile. On the very day that I had come to this conclusion, I was standing at a Cretaceous bar when someone tapped me on the shoulders, and I turned around. I recognized young Stamford, who had been addressed under me at Bart's. The sight of a friendly face in the great wilderness of London is pleasant, thinking indeed too lonely a man. In old days, Stanford had never been a particular crony of mine, but now I hailed him with enthusiasm, and he in this turn appeared to be delighted to see me. In the exuberance of my joy, I asked him to lunch with me at Holborn, and we started off together in a hansom. "Whatever have you been doing with yourself, Watson?" he asked in undistinguished wonder, as we rattled through the crowded London street. "You are as thin as the lathe, and as brown as a nut." I gave him a short stretch of my adventure, and had hardly concluded it by the time that we reached our destination. "Poor devil," he said. After he said that, he listened to my misfortunes. "What are you up to now?" "Looking for lodging," I answered, trying to solve the problem as to whether it is possible to get a comfortable room at reasonable price. "That's a strange thing," remarked by a companion. "You are the second man to a day that has used this kind of expression to me." "And who was the first?" I asked him. "A fellow who is working at the chemical laboratory up at the hospital. He was bemoaning himself this morning because he could not get someone to go half with him in some size of a nice room, which he had found, but which were too much for his purse." "By Jove!" I cried. "If he really wants someone to share the room and the expense, I am the very man for him. I should prefer him a partner to be being alone." Young Stamford looked rather strangely at me over his wine glasses. "You do not know Sherlock Holmes yet," he said. "Perhaps you would not care for him as a constant companion." "Why? What is there against him?" "Oh, I didn't say there was anything against him. He is a little quirk in his ideas, an enthusiast in some branches of science. As far as I know, he is a decent fellow enough." "A medical student, I suppose," I said. "No, I have no idea what he is intended to go on for. I believe he is well up in anatomy and he is first class chemist, but as far as I know, he has never taken out any systematic medical classes. His studies are very delusionary and eccentric, but he has amassed a lot and lot of way of knowledge which would astonish him, professor himself." "Did you never ask him what he was going into for?" I asked. "No, he is not a man that it is easy to draw out, though he can be communicative enough when he was fancy sizes or fancy seizes him." "I should like to meet him," I said. "If I am lodged to anyone with, I should prefer a man with of a studious and quiet behavior. I am not strong enough yet to stand much noise or excitement. I had enough of both in Afghanistan to last me for the remainder of my natural existence. How could I meet this friend of yours?" "He is sure be at the laboratory right now," returned by my companion. "He either avoid the place for weeks or less he works for these from morning to night. If you like, we shall drive around together for an afternoon luncheon or—" "Certainly," I answered, and the conversation drifted away into other channel. As we made our way to the hospital after leaving the Holborn, Stanford gave me a new few more practical about the gentleman whom I am supposed to take as a fellow lodger. "You mustn't blame me if you don't get on him with him," he said. "I should know nothing about more than him than I have learned from meeting him occasionally in the laboratory. You proposed this arrangement, okay? So you must not hold me on responsible." "If we don't get on this, it'll be easy to be part company." I answered. "It seems to me, Stanford," I added, looking at hard at my companion. "Okay, that you have some reason for washing your hands of this matter. Is their fellow's temper so formidable, or what it is it? Don't be merely mouthed about it." "It is not easy to express the inexpressible," he answered with a laugh. "Holmes is a little bit too scientific for taste. It approaches to cold bloodedness. I could imagine his giving a friend a little pinch of a state of a vegetable alkaloid, not out of malevolence, you understand, but simply out of the spirit of inquiry in order to have an accurate idea of the effects. To do justice, I think that he would take it himself with the same readiness. He appears to have a passion for definite and exact knowledge. Very right, too. Yes, but it may be pushed to excess. When it comes to beating the subjects in the discussion room with a stick, it is certainly taking rather a bizarre shape. Beating to subjects? Yeah, to verify how far bruises may be produced after death. I saw him it with my own eyes. And yet you say he is not a medical student? No, heaven knows what this object of his mind studies are. But here we are, and you must form your own impressions about him. As we spoke, we turned down a narrow lane and passed through a small side door, which is open into a wing that of a great hospital. It was familiar ground to me, and I indeed no guiding as we ascended the Blickstone staircase and made our way down with a long corridor. With this vista, the whitewashed wall and the dun-colored doors. Near the further end, a low arched passage branches away from it and led us to the chemical laboratory. This was a lofty chamber, lined and littered with countless bottles. Aboard, low tables were scattered about, which bristled with retorts, test tubes, little Bunsen lamps, with their blue flickering flames. There was only one student in this room, who was bending over a distant table, absorbed with his work. At the sound of our footsteps, he glanced around and sprang to his feet with a cry of pleasure. I have found it! I have found it! He shouted to my companion, running towards us with a test tube in his hand. I have found a reagent which is precipitated by hemoglobin and by nothing else. He had discovered a gold mine. Great delight could not have shone upon his features. Dr. Watson, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, said Mr. Stamford, introducing us. Oh, how are you? He said cordially and gripping my hands with a strength for which I should hardly given him credits. Oh, you have been in Afghanistan, I perceive. How on earth did you know that? I asked in astonishment. Never mind, he said. The question now is about hemoglobin. No doubt you see the significance of this discovery of mine, right? It is interesting chemically, no doubt. But practically? Why? A man is the most practical medical legal discovery for years. Don't you see that it gives us a infallible test for blood stains? Come over here now. He seized me with a coat sleeve in his eagerness and drew me over the table at which he had been working on. Let us have some fresh blood, he said, digging a long bodkin into his finger, and draw off the resulting drop of a blood in the chemical pipette. Now I added this small quantity of blood into a liter of water. You perceive that the resulting mixture has appearance of a pure water. The proportion of blood cannot be more than 1 in a million. I have no doubt, however, we shall be able to obtain characteristic reactions. As we spoke, he threw into this vessel a few white crystals and then added some drop of transparent fluid. In an instant, the content assumed a dull mango-like color, and a brownish dust was precipitated to the bottom of the glass jar. Ha ha! He cried, clapping with his hands and looking at as delighted as a child with a new toy. What do you think of it? It seems to be a very dedicated test, I remarked with myself. Beautiful, beautiful. The old Gunicam test was very clumsy and uncertain. So, this is a microscopic examination for blood corpuscles. The latter is valueless if the stains are very few hours old. Now, this appears to act as a otherwise whether the blood is old or new. Had this test to be invented, there are hundreds of men now walking on the earth who would long ago pay the penalty of their crimes. Indeed, I murmured. Criminal cases are continuously hinging upon that one point. A man is suspected for a crime months perhaps after it has been committed. His linen or clothes are examined, and brownish stain discovered upon them. Are they blood stains, or mud stains, or rust stains, or fruit stains, or what they are? That is a question which has puzzled many of an expert. And why? Because there was no reliable test. Now we have Sherlock Holmes test, and there will no longer be any difficulty. His eyes fairly glittering as he spoke, and he put his hand over his heart and bowed as if to someone applauding crowd conjuring upon his imagination. You are to be congratulated, I remarked, considerably surprised at his enthusiasm. There was a case of von Bischoff at Frankfurt last year. He was certainly has been and had test been in existence. Then there was a Mason of Bradford. and the notorious Mullah, and Lefebvre of Montpellier, and Samson of New Orleans. I could name a score of cases in which it would have been decisive. You seems to be walking calendar of crime, Stanford stated with a laugh. You might be start a paper on those lines. Call it the police news of the past. Very interesting. Reading it might be so made too, he remarked, sticking a small piece of plaster over the pricking on his finger. I have to be careful, he continued, turning to me with a smile. For I dabble with the poison a good deal. He held out his hand as he had spoken, and I noticed that it was all molten over his similar pieces of plaster and discolored with strong acids. We came here on business, said Stamford, sitting down on a three-legged stool and pushing another one in direction of his foot. My friend, here he wants to take diggings, and as you were complaining that you could get no one to go half with you, I thought that I had better bring him to you, so that you could be together. Sherlock Holmes seems delighted at the idea of sharing his room with me. I have my eyes on the suited Barker Street, he said, which would suit us down to the ground. You don't mind the smell of a strong tobacco, I hope? I always smoke a ships of myself, I answered. That's good enough. I generally have chemicals about and occasionally do experiments. Would that honor you? By no means. Okay, let me see. What are my other shortcomings? I get in the dump at the time and I don't open my mouth for days on end. You must not think that I'm scully when I do that. Just let me know, just let me alone, and I will soon be the right. What I have to confess for now? It's just as well we have two fellows to know the worst of one another before we begin to live together. I laughed at his cross examination. Uh, I keep a pub. It is a bull pub, I said. And I object the row for becoming my nerves are shaken, and I get up at all sorts of ungodly hours, and I am extremely lazy. I have another set of vice when I am well, but those are principal ones at present. Do you incline violin playing is your category of rose? He asked anxiously. It depends upon the player, I answered. A well played violin is treat for the gods. A bad played one? That's all right. That's all right. He cried with a merry laugh. I think we may consider the thing as settled. That's it. Okay, when shall we see them? Call for me there at the noon tomorrow, and we will go together and settle everything, he answered. All right, noon exactly, I said with a shaking hands. We left the room and working among his chemicals, and he walked together towards my hotel. By the way, I asked, suddenly stopping, turning around with Mr. Stanford. How the deuce did you know that I had come from Afghanistan? My companion smiled me in a majestic smile. That's just his little peculiarity, he said. A good many people have wanted to know how he find out things. Oh, a mystery, is it? I cried it with rubbing my hands. This is very piquant. I am much obliged to find out for bringing us together. The proper study of a mankind is a man, you know. You should study about him. And as he said, he bladed me a goodbye. You will find him a naughty problems. I thought, I will wager you that he will learn more about than you about him. Goodbye. Goodbye, I answered and strolled on to my hotel, considerably interested in my new acquaintance. Okay, fellas, today this is the end of chapter 1. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson met today and they are excited about getting for a new room with a affordable price so that they can chat together. And Watson got curious about this peculiarity and how Sherlock Holmes thinking and acting the way he behaves. So we need to read more and let's hope Watson finds more about Sherlock Holmes. Thank you.